You're now tuned in to SoCHiology, a lifestyle brand that analyzes Chicago culture and connected topics abroad, yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And I'm your host, Antoine Twiz Taylor from True Stories Media. Gentrification has been a hot topic across the country for a long time now, but it resonates a little bit more when it's in your own backyard. Pilsen is a neighborhood on the Lower West Side of Chicago, and it's been a hot spot for gentrification for decades now. This SoCHiology episode is divided into two halves. The first half, I talk with Dr. Carolina Sternberg. She's an associate professor and chair of the Latin American and Latino Studies Department at DePaul University. She's going to explain to us what is gentrification, what is non-white gentrification, what are the socioeconomic effects of both, and more. So, Dr. Sternberg, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how did you get involved in the field that you're involved in now?
Yes, sure. Thank you so much, Antoine, for inviting me to your podcast. My name is Carolina Sternberg, and I use she, her, hers as pronouns. And I'm originally from Buenos Aires, Argentina. You may pick that from my accent. That I'm not from the U.S. And I did my bachelor's in geography and master's in public policy back in Argentina, and moved to the U.S. Around 2006 to pursue a PhD in urban geography. And I've always been interested in studying urban policies and their impacts on the spatial organization of cities, and more in particular, how these urban policies profoundly impact working class communities and communities of color. I actually continued my academic career at DePaul University, teaching introductory courses about Latin America, and also doing research on this topic on gentrification, both in Chicago and my hometown in Buenos Aires. If we consider gentrification as an urban policy, we can understand that it has been greatly impacted the lives and livelihoods of people of color and working class populations in both cities.
What exactly, can you explain to us, what is non-white gentrification? Like, we hear the word gentrification a lot, but what exactly does that mean? What is non-white gentrification?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. So this is a term that my colleague Matthew Anderson and I used in a publication released in 2013 about a specific type of gentrification happening both in our study in Pilsen and Bronzeville that goes parallel to the more mainstream white middle class gentrification. So Pilsen is still a predominant working class Mexican-American neighborhood, but we understand that non-white gentrification in Pilsen could be attributed to a more affluent second-generation Latinx professionals who actually started buying and renovating property and businesses in the mid to late 2000, let's say, in Pilsen, because they wanted to live where their parents or also grandparents used to live when they moved from Mexico to Chicago during the post-war period. So they wanted to reclaim their roots by living in Pilsen. And one thing to note is that even if these were a small number of purchases and renovations compared to what happened with the white middle class, these purchases and renovations continued pushing property values up and displaced families in Pilsen. One thing that I think it's very interesting to mention is that this generation started calling themselves the Mappies, meaning Mexican Yappies.
Okay.
There's an article actually in the Chicago Tribune from 2009 where the reporter interviews Maya Solis, the daughter of former Pilsen alderman Danny Solis, and she says that she likes to call herself a Mappy. So this reference to the non-white gentrification or the we can call it the Latinx gentrification. But I think it's important to know that this type of gentrification, the non-white gentrification, in the case of Pilsen, the Latinx gentrification, is still very emergent or incipient and should not, by no means, should be compared to the larger white middle class gentrification that has been happening in Pilsen since the 1990s. I also wanted to refer just a little bit to the case of Brownsville. The non-white gentrification there is a bit more complex, but let's say that after the city demolished almost the entire housing projects in Brownsville, more precisely the Robert Taylor homes, the price of the land there went up, and Black middle class homeowners and construction companies literally saw this an opportunity to make a lot of profit and started redeveloping specific blocks along State Street, building a very large condominium complexes, some of them very luxurious and, of course, unaffordable to the long-term residents in Brownsville.
When it comes to non-white gentrification, so it's kind of like two different forms of gentrification taking place concurrently, right? That's what it sounds like. So you have non-white gentrification with the second and third generation Latino X residents that are buying up property, continuing to live in the neighborhoods that they grew up in, the neighborhoods that they known all their lives, which one can say is a good thing because it's kind of preserving the culture. But then on the other side of the coin, you have white gentrification. Does this kind of like create a clash in these neighborhoods, specifically Pilsen, would you say? Or like, does it blend seamlessly?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. So I don't think it blends really well. I would say that any type of gentrification is really destructive, especially in Pilsen. That I was going to mention that it's estimated that Pilsen lost around 10,000 Mexicans and Mexican Americans were displaced from 2000 to 2010. So even if the ethnic population is kept, is maintained, I think both any type of gentrification is very destructive to working class neighborhoods, and especially neighborhoods where there is predominantly a community of color, especially because they've been living there mostly since 1920s or I would say more 1950s, and there are long-term residents that have built their roots there, built their community, built their connections, and being displaced. These 10,000 Mexicans and Mexican Americans that had been displaced, they had to start from scratch. They had to start from scratch elsewhere, and they lost their networks, community, sense of community, and sense of belonging, right? So I think from community meetings and articles I've been reading, this type of non-white gentrification is also very harmful to long-term residents.
As far as the harm goes, the socioeconomic effects on these residents is kind of like, is it just like the property values going up, which of course makes the rent goes up, which, makes property taxes go up. And some of these residents who have lived here for years probably have their properties paid off, right? So all they're paying is property taxes, but now, the income that they're bringing in can't cover these property taxes. Is that a form of, the effects?
Yeah, well, I would like to actually do a short chronology of the socioeconomic effects, so listeners could understand these effects a little bit more clearly, and also give some sort of periodization of how things happened. So gentrification in Pilsen started since the early 1990s when an ethnic white homeowner started buying rundown houses along Halsted Street and converted them into lofts and art galleries, attracting a more affluent population. Since the early 2000s, gentrification advanced at a fast pace with the expansion of UIC campus that is bordering Pilsen in the north, and was primarily led by white middle-class faculty and students looking for affordable housing to live close to UIC campus. Also, in parallel, small and big developers started buying property along the 18th Street and turned them into upscale condominiums. So not only these new constructions weren't affordable for the long-term residents, but they pushed rent prices up and property taxes that long-term residents could not afford anymore. As I mentioned, it is estimated that from 2000 to 2010, 10,000 Mexicans and Mexicans-Americans were displaced from their houses, and they have to look elsewhere to live, especially they moved to Elgin, Cicero, Berwyn, and Midwest, most southwest suburbs. So the Latinx gentrification came later, late, I would say mid to late 2000, and it actually fueled this type of white-led gentrification, and also went in parallel to this white-led gentrification, and it provoked the same socioeconomic effects that they pushed properties up, property taxes up, or rent prices up, and the consequences are as I mentioned, that long-term residents that have been renovating their houses, that have been working in the neighborhoods and building community, lost completely their roots.
Why is Pilsen such a hot location for these forms of gentrification? You mentioned UIC, which, right. Everyone in Chicago knows UIC is right by Pilsen. So those of you who do not live in Chicago, UIC is a university literally right by Pilsen.
Yeah, actually, no, it's not just Pilsen, it's everything that it's adjoining what we call it the downtown Chicago, all the central business district, all those properties, the pressure for gentrification is moving west and further west. So Humboldt Park it's been affected by gentrification, especially the east Humboldt Park, and also Garfield Park has been not in the same manner or the same intensity as Humboldt Park and Pilsen, but Garfield Park has been impacted by white-led gentrification. Mm-hmm. But to respond to your question about Pilsen, how is become a hotspot, as you said, for gentrification. One, as you mentioned, is the UIC campus that keeps expanding, and of course, faculty and students want to live close to where they study or they work, and of course, they want affordable housing. And Pilsen is still predominantly affordable, and that is very attractive. Plus, as I mentioned, is only 20 minutes from downtown Chicago. So you have all the cultural life, all the attractions, all the business is close to Pilsen, just 20 minutes away, and also it's a very cultural community in terms of public art and art galleries, and that is really fueling the interest of middle upper class people. Especially Pilsen is targeted as the hipsters, community. Hipsters tend to they understand Pilsen community understand that hipsters are going there just to experience the public art, the art culture, while they pay really low amount of rent. Mm-hmm. So there's these three aspects that is really close to downtown. There also I was mentioning public art, but also the food is really attractive to a lot of incomers. The Mexican food is something that a lot of Americans value, and especially being being really, really affordable, food that is authentic and really affordable. It's a very attractive aspect. And all these things make Pilsen. And the fact, of course, that, as I mentioned, that affordable, it's still very affordable in terms of rents and in terms of property taxes, makes this even better for people that want to settle in there, but also for developers that can make a lot of profits.
Are the residents getting any opportunities from the growth that's happening there?
The community in Pilsen is very active. They've been installing a lot of redevelopment projects, and if it wasn't for how active the community is, a lot of redevelopment initiative would have most likely pushed even more people out from the neighborhood, and so they've been active to stall these redevelopment projects, but also to push for to kind of negotiate with developers and businesses to leave jobs for the residents, right? And that hasn't been very successful. Current alderman Byron Sitcho, he's been trying really hard since he stepped in as alderman to protect the jobs for local people, but that has been hard. However, what they've been successful in doing in Pilsen was to ask developers to actually, it's part of it's a law actually, or ordinance in Chicago, that new developments of, I think, 10 units, I might be wrong about the number of units, but at least for a new construction of 10 units, at least 20% of the units should be designated as affordable. Affordable meaning that it has to be below the market rates. So this is an effort, something that continues happening. Although Pilsen residents or long-term residents, they usually try to also protect the mom and pop's businesses. They try to purchase things and buy coffee and everything from people that are local, right? They try to protect the businesses. This is something that is very interesting in Pilsen, that they it's not that they boycott chains, but they always try to alert newcomers and tourists and visitors to buy and get food or get small things from local businesses and not from chains. That's a way also to protect the jobs in Pilsen
and keep that community going. You know,
exactly.
Keep it intact. So, where do you see things headed in the future? 5-10 years from now.
Yeah. So I don't think it will completely change the community because, as I mentioned, the community has been highly active, I would say, since 1950s, when they first moved in Chicago for other purposes. But since the late 1990s, when gentrification started moving at a fast pace, the community was able to stall a lot of redevelopment projects and pushing for affordable housing and as I mentioned, pushing keeping their mom and pop's businesses locally, and so they've been so strong. And now with the alderman that actually represents them, I don't think the community will change completely because of this activism. They actually, to mention one of the projects, the last big project, it wasn't a redevelopment initiative though, but the Chicago City Council created the Pilsen Historic Landmark that would protect 900 historic buildings. And
I've read about that.
Yeah, and the active community, along with Byron Sitko, the new alderman, were able to stop the project because it would have led to even more gentrification. So to explain this a little bit more, even if historic buildings that date from early 1800s weren't really protected against demolition for I don't know for how long, this designation would have only forced many long-term residents to sell their homes because the additional expenses a landmark designation would have imposed to residents living in this area would have been incredibly high, right? This historic designation, what it does is yes to create more expensive to the homeowners, and these people are working class people and cannot afford more expenses like renovations or any other things that actually they could apply for loans, but the interest and the deposit that it requires it's really unaffordable. It's onerous. Yeah.
So even though this will protect the properties, it's still in a sense pushing residents out.
Right. Yes. And that's why I'm happy that this was turned down.
No matter where you turn, it's still going to be problems. I mean, in this world and in this life, there's always going to be problems, right? But you know, it's kind of sad, you know, because so many people, they really have no option. You know, it is a great thing that there are still a lot of Latino residents there that are making big moves. You know, they have accumulated success and they're keeping the community going. But it's always going to be those that, you know, get the short end of the stick. It's always going to be that.
Yeah, but I'm positive because, again, the community is really strong and they know what they want and they want to preserve their sources of labor, their housing. Yeah. And they have now that they have an alderman that represents them, I think it won't be easy for developers or the city to keep pushing them out. So I'm very hopeful and positive that it won't turn into a Lincoln Park campus or Lincoln Park area. That actually Lincoln Park lost all their Puerto Rican community. They had to move elsewhere. They mostly live in Humboldt Park.
That was Dr. Carolina Sternberg. Now we're going to talk with Jose Perez, who's a lifelong resident of Pilsen, who still resides there to this day. He's an entrepreneur, and he's going to tell us his thoughts on gentrification and the progress the neighborhood has made. All right, Jose, tell us about how long have you been in Pilsen? Let's start there. Like, how long have you lived in that neighborhood?
First and foremost, Anton, I wanted to thank you for allowing me to tell my story.
Yeah, no problem.
But I actually have been in Pilsen for 45 years.
45 years. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I think I'm the second wave though of Latinos that actually came into Pilsen way back when, from the stories that I've been told before.
The second wave. Okay, so when was the first wave?
So from what I've gathered, it was in the late 60s.
Okay.
Right? Middle to late 60s. And so they had already, because when we came, there was already a big Latino population in Pilsen. Mm-hmm. So, and that was in 75.
75. So you arrived in 75, and this was with your family. How many people were in your family?
At that time, actually, there was 3 of us only. So it was my parents and then my older brother and older sister. So we're currently 9 in total now.
You know, tell us about how the neighborhood was in the 70s or the early 80s, you know, from as far as you can remember. How was the neighborhood in Pilsen back then?
Well, back in the 70s, from what I recall, it wasn't such a good neighborhood the way everyone makes it seem. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people always talking about, taking it back to how it was before. But when you talk to the people that actually lived in those times, it wasn't a neighborhood you wanted to actually live in. it was ignored by pretty much everyone. No one really would say, well, first and foremost, it wasn't considered Pilsen. Nobody knew it as Pilsen. Back then, it was considered 18th Street.
18th
So
Street.
Pilsen, yeah. Pilsen is something new, maybe in the last 10 years, that they kind of categorize it under, but everything was 18th Street, just like La Villita was always called 26th Street. It was never called La Villita. Mm-hmm. So back then, I mean, it was crime-ridden. There was nothing but gangs. I would say as soon as you got off the highway on the 18th Street ramp between there, which is right around Canal Street, to Western, I mean, there must have been 40, 50 bars, liquor stores. So it was nothing to be proud of. But obviously, it was our home, and just like everything else, you can make it better. But it wasn't something that, like I said, that it was something that these people who are talking about wanting to go back to those times is not something that I would love to do. By the time I was graduating high school, I think I must have attended easily 15 to 20 funerals of my friends and colleagues, stuff like that. Yeah. It was it wasn't a pleasant area to be on.
Wow, 20 funerals. So you graduated high school. At what point did you notice the neighborhood starting to change? So based off everything you just told us, is something that, seems very, very horrific, right? Like you always got to look over your shoulder, a neighborhood that was basically in despair. But like you said, it was home, and we always love home. At what point did you started to see things changing?
In the late 90s. Well, there was always that whisper where everyone kept saying, because we were so close to UIC. And
and you guys Pilsen was created because UIC basically was, constructed, right? Because a lot of the Mexican Americans that lived where UIC stands today had to relocate to where Pilsen is currently, correct?
Yes, and that was part of the first wave of immigrants that came here that were Latinos. They're the ones that can tell you about that. But in the other side of the tracks, which is like 15th, 14th, going up to like Roosevelt, all the way from Halsted to Racine, all that area there was actually properties that they actually knocked down and leveled completely. And UIC was, they took it over. So I don't know if they eminent domained it or what they did exactly, but that's where the old Jewtown used to be. Mm-hmm. Okay? So, or the flea market, what they call it now, but it was called Jewtown back then.
Yeah.
But it was completely different back in the 2000s. Again, the whisper started getting a lot louder. People were saying that, UIC is going to start something, they're going to do something. And sure enough, once they broke ground, Pilsen started becoming, being put on the map more often than what it was before.
Demographics of the neighborhood started to change, right?
They started moving up. But here's the thing. A lot of people they only talk about one side of it, right? Okay. Which is a lot of people were moving on and they were trying to move out. When we were young, people were moving out to back of the yards because that area was nothing but Polish, and you got your front yard, and it was, you had your front lawn looking really nice. You had your backyard, you had your 2-car garage. So when someone actually either got a promotion or was able to get their family out, we never looked at it like, oh my God, you know what I'm saying? They're just they're leaving us. We were actually not only proud, but very supportive of the people, of the families that were actually moving to a much better place. But now you can see what it is now. So again, I mean, most of our neighbors were Latinos. It was a little bit of Latinos, African American. Very rarely did you see any white people around. But now in the 90s, that's when the shift started coming. Mm-hmm. And they started noticing, I believe just because of the location of where Pilsen's at, because it's so convenient when it comes to the highways. I mean, you can jump on any highway, 90, 55, you can go down Lakeshore Drive. Everything is here, and you're 2 minutes away from Little Italy, Chinatown, you name it. It's right here, Greektown. So I think that played a big factor, and UIC, of course, where people started investing and putting, again, Pilsen on the map.
Have you noticed any major cultural changes in your neighborhood? So we talked about how it used to be and like the bad things, but I'm sure everything wasn't always bad, right? Has there been an effect on the cultural changes in Pilsen as a result of gentrification? Can you speak on that? Like, have you seen any of that?
You know what? It's hard to believe, but this is my personal opinion. But back in the day when I was growing up in Pilsen, we weren't actually allowed, or even more than anything, when we would speak Spanish, there would be lots of times when we were in school, because there wasn't any Latino teachers at that time, or any minorities per se. A lot of the teachers wouldn't allow us to speak in Spanish, and I recall how if they caught you speaking Spanish, they would send you to the principal's office or send you home, or even worst case scenario, they would actually place us in autistic classes. So
wait, they would place you in an autistic class for speaking your native tongue?
Just for speaking speaking Spanish. And so a lot of my buddies and everything like that, one time I actually, was there for a couple of days. But again, that's the way they would punish us, right, for speaking Spanish. So to us, it seemed like, we should be ashamed of our culture and our history. And nowadays, that's not the case. So I don't know if it's the fact that because of the change that's happening in Pilsen, but I can tell you this, this new generation, they didn't go through what we went through, the trials and tribulations. And I think that's a great thing, because now I see our culture being embraced more, not only from our own people, but also other people that actually enjoy it. And I think it's a lot easier and a lot more easier to be proud of where you came from than it was before.
I'll tell you, that's crazy as hell. That they will literally put you guys in autistic classes, or punish you, give you detention for speaking your native tongue. It's kind of sick. I'll just be honest. Like, so when you look at it from that perspective, of course, it is definitely a great thing that the culture is being embraced more in Pilsen, but not just Pilsen, but the Latino culture in general is being embraced more, right? It seems like, do you worry though that it's a fine line between embracing it and appropriating it, or, like, how do you discern that?
Yeah, that's a tough question, because at the end of the day, and it really depends where you come from, because there's not one way, like just a perfect example, Dia de los Muertos, right, which is Halloween here for the U.S. It's celebrated in different ways in different states, right, of Mexico. So for someone, for people to actually, I guess, find a way to, offend us, it's kind of difficult, because certain things, I don't find it offensive, but if you're from a certain part or a certain state, yes, man, Taco Tuesdays, I really don't care. You know what I'm saying? At the end of the day, if that gets people to come out and support the Mexican restaurants or just the Latino restaurants, then let it be, Obviously, it's not degrading in any which way. It's just the way they've embraced it. Right, and they celebrate certain things that we don't celebrate, but that's cool. If we're able to turn that and make something positive out of it, at the end of the day, it's supporting the businesses, which in turn support the community, which also supports their employees, and it's just a trickle effect to everyone. But there are some times where certain things come out that I don't think is appropriate, but I think that those those are few and far between. And the individuals that think like that, I think they're stuck in the past. And eventually, they'll come around. But it has been a 180 here in Pilsen.
WB Easy, they were talking about how they're trying to establish a historic district there in Pilsen to protect somewhat like almost 500 buildings in Pilsen. What do you think about that? Because I know a lot of residents, they're kind of iffy about it because they believe that, obviously it's going to raise prices on a lot of things, a lot of, red tape when it comes to regulations for small businesses, things like that. It's kind of like a catch-22 in a sense because the historic district can protect the buildings, but then some residents are worried that, it's going to continue to push working class families out because prices are going to continue to go up, property value, rent, all of those things. What do you think about all of that?
Well, there's a positive to what they were trying to come up with, and I understand to keep this type of demographic or as far as the buildings are concerned, right? But they just went about it completely wrong. Where the community found out of it because of somebody, kind of heard about it instead of coming out and actually being more public about it. So it was that kind of. Yeah, so it was kind of like, oh, we're going to vote on it next week or something like that. You know what I mean? And everybody's like, what? What's going on? Even to the point where the alderman wasn't even aware of what was happening. So that pretty much, it kind of started off wrong. And I see sometimes what their intentions are, but sometimes when you come off that way, I mean, most people are already turned off by just the way it started. So I see, because I also have properties in Pilsen. So I see the importance of keeping the originality of Pilsen. And that's great and everything, but I'm also for change. We can't leave everything the same because if that ends up being that we're not going to progress. So change is good, right? When it's progression. Because a lot of these buildings are very old, and a lot of these buildings, some of them shouldn't really still be around, if you know what I mean. I've gone into a lot of buildings that I know have structural damage, right? And you have to be really good as far as being able to catch that. So should those be saved? You know what I'm saying? Because the cost of doing that, and then the cost of doing it the way the regulations are being not even asked, but implemented, it becomes very costly. So, and then just kind of what I heard was just to the contractors to get the work done that needed to, let's say, do any update or whatever work they were going to get done. There was going to be a list of contractors that they would use. And a lot of these contractors weren't even from Pilsen. So so there was unfortunately, a lot of things that the community didn't like. And more than anything, they just weren't even asked. They were just forced into. And so that's when they rallied together and were able to overturn it and not let it be.
You say you own property in Pilsen. How many properties do you own there?
Well, within the family, I think we have about 12 properties in Pilsen.
Oh, that's beautiful. That strip of liquor stores that you mentioned earlier, are they still there?
No, there's only a few of them. After Mayor Daley Jr. came around, he started closing them down. So so thank God for that. But no, there's a few of them, but nothing what they used to be before. A lot of them, they just either became restaurants or just shut down completely because it was a mix of bars and liquor stores. So a lot of the bars, very few of them, they were still able to salvage the green room. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that's right on off the corner of Outport and 18th Street. So that was completely, taking a business that was around even from when I remember, when we were here, and then just, completely remodeling the place, changing it up. And it's really nice. I've gone there a couple of times, and completely different than what it was before. To just punch house, I'm sorry, that was non-existent. That used to be more of a retail store for the church. So there's a lot of positive things that have happened in Pilsen, which has brought not only businesses, but when businesses come, they also bring employees. And employment. So it's a good thing. But yeah, a lot of them aren't around that were around way back when, because they were shut down.
We as a society, we love to talk about the American dream, right? Quote unquote. One can say that you're living the American dream, right? You lived in Pilsen your entire life. You've seen it, what it used to be. You see what it is now. You and your family, you own over 10 properties. You have your own insurance firm, correct?
Yeah.
How important is it for, and I read that you're very active in Pilsen. So how important is it for you to give back to your community and, basically show that you're a walking example that you can be successful?
Well, I'm a big advocate that really you can determine your own destiny. And that was something that was just taught by my parents. When we came here, we didn't have any papers. So obviously our struggles were a little bit harder than others. But at the end of the day, this country, you can do anything if you set your mind to it. And I know it sounds like a cliche, but it really is true. I literally just kind of started into real estate because my sister got us into it. And from there, once you surround yourself with the people that you need to surround yourself, which is pretty much the naysayers, and there's a lot of people that will always give you advice, but I think it's internal advice. I used to get advice all the time when I was looking to buy a commercial mixed-use building. Those are probably one of the most difficult ones to purchase because there's more down payment and obviously they're structured completely different. But I'll be honest with you, if I were to listen to the people that were telling me that I'm not going to qualify for the loan, that I shouldn't be getting it, or whatever the case is, I think they were just kind of telling me internally how they feel. And yeah, it did take a while, but I was turned down by about 5 or 6 different banks. But that last bank, they took us, and they gave us the loan. So that's why I would say within about 5 years, I probably purchased about 4 properties, right? Mm-hmm. That's a monumental task because just to even purchase one property. But again, when you surround yourself with the people that are able to mentor you and guide you in the right direction, and it goes the same thing with my farmers insurance agency. I'm going on my 13th year, and 2020 actually was one of our best years. And it's just because I just had that mentality where, okay, I understand everything else is bad, but what do we have control over? And if you focus on that, you're able to accomplish more than if you just literally focus on the negative all the time. People say Pilsen is tapped out. Oh, you know what? It's too late to invest. It's not too late. It's just you're not going to be able to invest just by yourself. But if you get 2 of your buddies or 3 of your buddies come together, then you can still purchase something, right? And then still be able to make profit because everybody knows that real estate with inflation, eventually over the course of years, you're going to make your return back plus profit. So more financial literacy, that's what us as minorities, we have to be taught from a young age, and that's something that isn't so common. So that's why whenever I get a chance, I'll be more than glad to tell people pretty much all the tricks that I have or everything that I've learned so that they can use it and be able to build their legacy for themselves and their family.
Last question. Well, second to last question. Let me ask you, where do you see Pilsen going in the next 10, 15 years? That's my second to last question. Then I'll give you my last question.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I don't see it. I don't see it being any more different than Lincoln Park. to be honest. I see everything moving towards that, where the high-end shops, the Starbucks are going to be starting to come around, right? Because even though it's gentrified, right, and there's still a big Latino community, a big minority community. So as long as the people that purchased the properties 20 years ago, they maintain their properties, and they know how to financially be able to get at the most from their properties, like the tenants and everything like that, there should be no reason for them to be leaving, because they could always be adjusting their rents. So I truly believe that eventually it'll get to what Lincoln Park is, but just with a little bit more swagger to it.
And the very last question, where's the best food in Pilsen? Who has the best food in Pilsen?
See, that's difficult. That's a loaded question, because if anything, I mean, Antoine, there's it's not just Mexican food here. You have anything from Mexican to American bistro to Chinese food. I think there's a sushi restaurant that opened up on Blue Island. So yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah, it's that's what a lot of people don't understand. It's not just Latin food anymore. So one of the restaurants, I think, that opened up a couple of years back, and he's on his second restaurant now. He used to work for Rick Davis, right? And he opened up his own restaurant. So if you like that type of food, I mean, that's something that he kind of, uses a lot of the recipes that I think he probably learned from Rick, and they just kind of put a twist on it. So down the street from there's a great burger place that it's kind of like the mom and pop place, but I mean, the burgers are much better than Portillo's. So
wow.
Yeah, the beauty about Pilsen is when you have a moment, come by and really just explore it for yourself. Because from block to block, it's completely different. And you'll find completely different things.
And what's the name of this burger place again?
Man, you know what? I've been there a couple of times. But it's on 18th Street between Wood and Damon. Right?
I'll find
north, just across the street from Harrison Park, brother. Right in the middle. You can't miss it, but I mean, they got some really, really good burgers there. So, not your average burger.
Yeah, I'll find it. I would definitely find it. If you enjoyed this episode, I ask for two things as always. Number one, leave a 5-star review. And number two, pass it on to a friend who may enjoy it as well. And don't forget to subscribe to our other podcast, Mogul Motivation from True Stories Media.